Yesterday we did the first Ask Me Anything episode of the brand new year, and today we're going to be doing the first one from every team video of the year 2022. As you can tell by the title and thumbnail, today we're going to be going over the best prospect from every NHL team. The last time I did one of these was 2019. I figured with it now being 2022, it was the perfect time to do an updated list. Obviously a lot has changed since 2019. The majority of prospects from that video have now graduated and became full-time NHLers. Others have just gotten passed over by other prospects in the system. And one thing I do want to clarify before we get started, every prospect in this video has played 10 or less NHL games. I just figured it would be easy that way to have some kind of criteria and some kind of pool of where I can pick players from. If you guys are excited for this and you want to see more one from every team videos throughout 2022, then be sure to drop a like on this video. I'd really appreciate it. And with that being said, let's go ahead and get started. We're going to go in reverse alphabetical order today. So the first team is the Winnipeg Jets, and this is one that you don't have to think too long and hard about. Their best prospect is 1000% Cole Perfetti, their 10th overall pick from the 2020 NHL draft. It still seems unfair that a team like the Winnipeg Jets with so many elite forwards got Cole Perfetti. He slipped down to number 10. I remember around the 2020 draft there was a lot of talk about Detroit potentially selecting Perfetti at number 4. He's an absolute blue chip prospect, has put up fantastic numbers in both of his stints in the American Hockey League last season and this season, and he was also the tournament leading scorer in the very small sample size we saw from the World Juniors. It's only a matter of time before this guy becomes a full-time NHLer, and a very good one. Next up we have the Washington Capitals, and in my opinion their best prospect at the moment is definitely Hendrix Lapierre, who they selected 22nd overall in the 2020 NHL draft. We actually saw a glimpse of him playing in the National Hockey League to start out this season. He played in 6 games, scored his first NHL goal, and honestly Washington probably could have gotten away with keeping him on the team for the entire season, and he most likely would have been a pretty productive player. But with the abundance of great forwards that the Capitals have, they didn't really need to keep Hendrix Lapierre up. They're playing the patient game, they're extending his ELC, but this is a player I fully expect to be competing for a full-time spot on the Capitals next season. Moving on now to the Vegas Golden Knights, obviously a team with a pretty depleted prospect system because, I mean, they trade all of their top picks. Brandstrom, Glass, Suzuki, Peyton Krebs, all traded. Their best prospect at the moment is, in my opinion, Caden Korczak, a 6'4" defenseman who is a second-round pick, 41st overall back in 2019. We got to see a good bit of Caden Korczak play for Team Canada in the World Juniors at last year's tournament. Don't really know if there's a whole lot there with this player. If he ever becomes a full-time NHLer, we'll have to wait and see. The Vancouver Canucks, another team like Vegas who doesn't really have a great prospect pool right now. In Vancouver's case, it's because a lot of their top prospects from years past are now full-time NHLers on the team. Obviously, they traded their first-round pick in the most recent NHL draft. For their best prospect, I'm going with winger Aidan McDonough, who was actually a 7th round pick by the Canucks back in 2019. He's 22 years old, put up very solid numbers in each of the past 3 seasons for Northeastern University in the NCAA. I'm not quite sure what his plans are. He's still unsigned if he plans to play out his 4 years at college and become an unrestricted free agent if the Canucks plan on signing him. I guess we'll have to wait and see, but yeah, in 2022 there really isn't any blue chip prospects in the Canucks system like there has been for the past, it feels like 5 years. Moving on now to the Toronto Maple Leafs, I definitely still think their best prospect is forward Nick Robertson, their 2nd round pick, 53rd overall from 2019. It's unfortunate that he's had so many bumps in the road in terms of his development. He obviously suffered an injury this season that has sidelined him for a lengthy period of time, and then just the staggered development because of him playing in a bunch of different places with shortened seasons and stuff like that. But for the most part, over the past couple of seasons, wherever Nick Robertson has played, he has excelled. He has looked fantastic. It's only a matter of time before he cracks the Maple Leafs lineup as a full-time player. I would expect him to be a solid middle 6 contributor for them next season. The Tampa Bay Lightning, another team like Vegas, like Vancouver, really don't have a great prospect pool whatsoever. I would say it's probably the worst of those 3 teams, honestly. I'm going with Dylan Duke as their best prospect, a 4th round pick, 126th overall in the 2021 NHL draft. He's a forward, looked good for the United States in the under-18s last year, scoring just under a half point per game pace this season with the University of Michigan, but it's not like he's playing at the top of the lineup. That's a very stacked Michigan team. Moving on now to the St. Louis Blues. For their best prospect, I'm definitely going with winger Jake Neighbors, who was selected 26th overall by the Blues in the 2020 NHL draft. Another player that we actually got to see play a decent bit in the National Hockey League this season. He got his 9 games in, had a goal and an assist, and it's similar to what I said about Hendrix Lapierre in Washington. St. Louis probably could have gotten away with keeping Neighbors up for the entire season, and he probably would have been a relatively productive player, but they're playing this patiently because they really don't need to keep him up. Again, it's just a real shame the World Juniors got canceled because this is a player that I expected to play a pretty big role for Team Canada. Moving on now to the Seattle Kraken. They weren't even in the National Hockey League the last time we did one of these best prospect from every team videos. Their best prospect at the moment is 1000% Matty Beniers, the second overall pick from the most recent NHL draft, having a fantastic season for the University of Michigan. This is a player that I really wanted to fall to the Red Wings in the 2021 NHL draft. Unfortunately, he didn't. I don't really think Matty Beniers has the potential to be a superstar number one centerman, but a very good, responsible two-way second-line centerman. That's kind of what I see him carving out his role as when he becomes an NHLer. The San Jose Sharks, this is an easy one. William Eklund, their 7th overall pick from the 2021 NHL draft. In my opinion, one of the best NHL affiliated prospects out there right now. We got a glimpse of him in the NHL this season. He got his 9 games in, had 4 assists in those 9 games, and overall looked really solid. I can't imagine it was an easy decision for the San Jose Sharks to send him back to Sweden after those 9 games. This is a player I'm a really big fan of, and I expect him to be one of the Calder Trophy favorites next season. The Pittsburgh Penguins, for their best prospect, I'm going with Samuel Poulin, their 21st overall pick from the 2019 NHL draft. Not a great prospect pool in Pittsburgh, obviously, because they've been such a good team for such a long time. That's usually how that works. He's playing his first professional season this year in the American Hockey League for Wilkes-Barre. His numbers aren't jumping off the sheet at you. They're okay. I'm not really sure what all is here with this prospect if he ever becomes, a top 6 forward in the NHL. I don't really think he has that kind of ceiling. The Philadelphia Flyers definitely going to go with defenseman Cam York, who they selected 14th overall in 2019, one of the many great prospects that came out of the U.S. National Development Team program in that 2019 draft. And ever since being drafted, for the most part, Cam York has looked very good wherever he's played. The University of Michigan, he put up fantastic numbers in 1920 and 2021. He's looked solid for Lee Valley in the American Hockey League this season, and he was one of the better defensemen in the World Juniors last year. Next up, we have the Ottawa Senators. Another defenseman here, definitely have to go with Jake Sanderson, the 5th overall pick from the 2020 NHL draft, who has developed quite nicely since being selected in 2020. It seems like his offensive game is a little bit further along than what was initially expected. He has 19 points in just 15 games in the NCAA this season, and he got some pretty high praise from the United States head coach in the World Juniors, the coach saying that Jake Sanderson could be playing for the Ottawa Senators this season. That's how good he is already. Moving on now to the New York Rangers, we have another defenseman here, Braden Schneider, the 19th overall selection in the 2020 NHL draft. The New York Rangers just draft so well. They got Keandre Miller outside of the lottery in 2019, and obviously they got the luck selecting Kakko and Lafreniere, but Braden Schneider seems like he's going to be another one of those, mid to late first round picks by the New York Rangers that turns out to be a very good NHLer. I follow a lot of Rangers fans on Twitter, and I've seen a lot of them calling for him to be playing in the NHL already. Moving on now to the Islanders. For their best prospect, I'm definitely going to go with Atu Ratti, who was their 2nd round pick, 52nd overall in the most recent NHL draft, a player who really fell in the draft rankings. I remember like a year and a half to 2 years ago, he was supposed to be like a top pick in the 2021 draft. The Islanders have to be pretty happy with where they were able to select Ratti. He's point per game this season in the Liga with 14 points in 14 games compared to last season where he only had 6 points in 35 games. Moving on now to the Devils. For their best prospect, I think it's 1000% Alexander Holtz, the 7th overall selection from the 2020 NHL draft. This is a player who I think once he becomes a full-time NHLer is going to quickly become the best goal scorer on the New Jersey Devils. He has an insane shot. His ability to change his release in tight spaces makes him extremely deadly. For the next 5 to 7 years, I fully expect Jack Hughes to be leading the Devils in points on a year in year out basis, but I think Alexander Holtz is going to be the guy leading them in goals. The Nashville Predators, I'm going to go with goaltender Yaroslav Askarov, who was the 11th overall selection in the 2020 NHL draft, with Philip Tomasino now being a full-time member of the team. I feel like Askarov has to take over as their best prospect. I'll be honest, I'm not a huge Yaroslav Askarov fan. He plays an interesting style. His performances in the World Juniors the past couple tournaments haven't been great. He's just a really intriguing prospect because the potential is there. It's just a matter of can he put it all together? Can he get the fundamentals nailed down? But just based off of sheer potential, I think easily he's their best prospect at the moment. The Montreal Canadiens, Cole Caulfield has held this spot for the past couple of years, but now with him becoming a full-time member of the team, I'm going to go with Caden Gooley as their best prospect, currently their 16th overall selection from the 2020 NHL draft. A big defenseman, good skater for his size, don't really know about the offensive upside when it comes to Caden Gooley's game. One player comparable I've actually seen a lot, funny enough, is Ben Sherratt, who's currently a defenseman of the Montreal Canadiens. Moving on now to the Minnesota Wild, a team with a fantastic prospect pool currently, who have the likes of Jesper Wallstedt and Matthew Boldy, who I will give honorable mentions to, but for their best prospect, I definitely have to go with Marco Rossi. I was a huge advocate for Marco Rossi leading up to the 2020 NHL draft. He was one of the players that I would have liked Detroit to select 4th overall. Obviously, I'm happy with Lucas Raymond, but I really think Marco Rossi is going to be an amazing NHLer, and this is going to be looked back on as an absolute steal, the Wild getting him 9th. He's currently up to 23 points in 21 games in the American Hockey League this season for Iowa, and thinking of a 1-2 punch down the middle moving into the future of Joel Eriksson Ek and Marco Rossi is a pretty exciting thing for Wild fans. The Los Angeles Kings, a team with a loaded prospect pool, but as their best, I definitely have to go with centerman Quinton Byfield, who is the 2nd overall pick from the 2020 NHL draft. Obviously faced a pretty big setback heading into this season with the injury, a broken ankle or an ankle fracture, something along those lines I believe it was, and if it hadn't been for that injury before the season started, I honestly feel like there's a good chance Quinton Byfield could have been a full-time NHLer at this point in the season. This is a prospect with just an immense amount of potential, and if he lives up to that potential, if he reaches it fully, then the Kings are probably going to have one of the best centermen in the league on their hands. The Florida Panthers, for their best prospect, I'm going to go with Grigory Denisenko, who is a 15th overall pick by the team in the 2018 NHL draft, one of the few prospects in this video that were drafted in 2018. He's taking a while to really develop, maybe a little bit longer than Panthers fans would have expected after selecting him, but man, I think he's going to be worth the wait. This is a player who may not be an elite top-line winger, but a middle six forward who can chip in a decent amount of offense and really be an agitator, get under the other team's skin. That's where I think Denisenko is going to thrive. Moving on now to the Edmonton Oilers, I'm going to go with defenseman Philip Broberg, who they selected 8th overall in the 2019 NHL draft, has 12 points in 17 American Hockey League games this season. We have actually seen a good glimpse of him in the NHL. He got 8 games in. The thing about Philip Broberg is, at this point at least, he's not the type of player Edmonton can just put into the lineup and hope he fixes their defensive problems, because Broberg is primarily a more offensive-minded defenseman. But with that being said, I still think this is a real solid prospect, a guy who's going to have a place on the team, going to have a place in the National Hockey League sooner rather than later. Next up, we have the Red Wings. I'll give honorable mentions to Sebastian Cossa and Jonathan Berggren, but I feel like their best prospect right now, just based off of potential alone, has to be Simon Edvinsson, the 6th overall pick from the 2021 NHL draft. I was incredibly impressed with what I saw from him in the very small sample size we got to see of players in this year's World Juniors tournament. Initially, when Detroit drafted Edvinsson 6th overall, I thought he was a player that's probably like 2, 3, maybe even 4 years out, but honestly, with the way he's played this season in the SHL, and again with what he showed in the World Juniors, I feel like this is a guy we could see on the Red Wings as soon as next season. Moving on now to the Dallas Stars, for their best prospect, I'm going to go with defenseman Thomas Harley, the 18th overall pick from the 2019 NHL draft, and this is a prospect who I feel like if he was on maybe some other teams in the NHL would already be a full-time NHLer, but with Dallas, I mean, they have a very, very strong blue line, top 4 especially with the likes of Heiskanen, Klingberg, Suter, and Esa Lindell, but Harley has gotten a look this season with the Stars at the NHL level. He's played 7 games, and he's a guy that I expect heading into next season to get a real long look at being a member of their top 6. Moving along now to the Columbus Blue Jackets, for their best prospect, I definitely have to go with Kent Johnson, who is their 5th overall selection from the 2021 NHL draft. To me, one of the most exciting prospects out there, one of the most fun prospects to watch out there right now. The things that he tries, the things he pulls off are just insane. He's so creative offensively. He has an amazing set of hands, and if he reaches his potential, if he reaches, his ceiling, I feel like this is a guy who can be a 75+ point player in the NHL for the Blue Jackets. Moving on now to the Colorado Avalanche, with the likes of Alex Newhook and Bowen Byram being prominent members of the NHL club now, I feel like their best prospect by default that's played 10 or less games is Justin Barron, their 1st round pick, 25th overall from the 2020 NHL draft, who has actually already made his NHL debut. He's played a couple of games for Colorado this season, only really because they were riddled with players in protocol and they kind of had to have him in the lineup. but still had to have been nice for him to, get that experience and see what NHL hockey is like a little bit. The Chicago Blackhawks, for their best prospect, I'm going with Lukas Reichel, the 17th overall selection from the 2020 NHL draft. Had a very good season in Germany last season, 27 points in 38 games. Has been playing this season with the Rockford IceHogs and is putting up real solid numbers with 14 points in 18 games. For a mid-round pick, Lukas Reichel has developed pretty nicely. Chicago has to be pretty happy with how he's looked thus far. Next up, we have the Carolina Hurricanes. For their best prospect, I'm going to go with Jack Drury, who is a second-round pick by them, 42nd overall in the 2018 NHL draft. Another player who has actually made his debut this season. He played 2 games with the Canes because, half their team was in protocol, and Jack Drury actually looked very good and very dangerous in those games. He had 2 goals. One of those games was against the Red Wings, so I got to see a lot of them. He's also putting up really solid numbers with the Chicago Wolves in the AHL as well. It's looking like Carolina could have a potential steal here in Jack Drury. Continuing on now, next up we have the Calgary Flames. I feel like this one was between Connor Zary and Jacob Pelletier. I decided to go with Pelletier, their 26th overall selection in the 2019 NHL draft. Had a really impressive tournament for Canada at last year's World Juniors, and this season, in his first professional season for the Stockton Heat, he's actually lighting it up. He's got 28 points in 25 games, which is actually leading the team in points by 4. He's having a fantastic first professional season, and Calgary has to be pretty happy with how he's developed. The Buffalo Sabres, this was a very easy one. Owen Power, the first overall selection from the 2021 NHL draft, a prospect who's kind of proven me wrong already. His offensive game is a lot further along and just a lot better than I initially thought it was when he was selected. He's got 23 points in 18 games for Michigan this season in the NCAA, and he looked very good as Canada's power play quarterback in the World Juniors. Obviously had a hat trick in their first game. Owen Power is going to be very, very good for a very long time, and hopefully a big contributor in turning the Buffalo Sabres organization around over the next couple of years. The Boston Bruins, their best prospect over the past couple of seasons was widely regarded as Jack Studnicka, but he's played too many games now to qualify for this video, so I'm going to go with Fabian Lysell, who was selected 21st overall by the Bruins in the most recent NHL draft. Played 26 SHL games last season, only had 3 points, but he didn't get a lot of minutes. He's actually now came over to North America this season and is playing for the Vancouver Giants and has 28 points in 23 games. It looks like he's adjusting to North American ice nicely. I wouldn't call Lysell a blue chip prospect, more of like a project pick. I think this is a guy that's going to take a little bit longer to develop than maybe some other players, but he definitely does have a good amount of potential. Moving on now to the Arizona Coyotes, I definitely have to go with Dylan Guenther, the 9th overall pick from the 2021 NHL draft. They selected him with the pick they got from Vancouver in the OEL and Connor Garland trade. I'm a pretty big fan of Dylan Guenther. He has a lot of creativity in his offensive game. He's a threat to pass, he's a threat to shoot, and overall I think if he reaches his potential, he can be a real solid top 6 play driving winger for the Arizona Coyotes. And now finishing off the video with the Anaheim Ducks, this is an easy one, obviously with Zegras and Drysdale being prominent members on the team. Their best prospect right now is Mason McTavish, the 3rd overall pick from the most recent NHL draft. Another one of those players who we got a glimpse of this season. He got his 9 games in with the Anaheim Ducks and looked pretty solid. 2 goals, 1 assist, 3 points in those games. Definitely didn't make the decision easy for the Anaheim Ducks to send him back, but like I said with William Eklund earlier in the video, this is a player who I think is going to be one of the favorites for the Calder Trophy heading into next season. So that is going to wrap up today's video, going over the best prospect from every NHL team in 2022. I apologize, this one went a little bit longer than I expected, but I know a lot of you guys do enjoy the longer videos. So if you did enjoy, please be sure to leave the video a like. I'd really appreciate it. And if this was your first time checking out the channel and you want more NHL content just like this, be sure to hit that subscribe button, and I'll talk to you all soon.